Welcome, everyone. I'm excited to kick off our presentation today. We're diving into Mega Goal 3.1, which is part of Unit 3. Today's theme is What Will They Think of Next?, focusing on the fascinating world of form, meaning, and function. Over the next few slides, we'll explore how these elements come together to shape our understanding and innovation. So let's get started and see what's in store. Today, we will focus on differentiating how we use words connected with space and the planetary system correctly. We will look at the difference between regular and irregular verbs in the past tense, which is essential for clear communication. We'll also review how to form sentences using the past simple of the verb be and be born, so you can talk about past events accurately. Additionally, we will practice forming yes-no questions and WH questions in the simple present tense. By the end of this lesson, you'll understand these key points thoroughly and be able to apply them confidently in your speaking and writing. Today, I want to focus on the simple present tense, which is one of the most fundamental aspects of English grammar. This tense is primarily used to describe habits, general truths, and routines. It's the tense we use when talking about things that happen regularly or facts that are always true. For example, when I say, "She walks to school every day," I am describing a routine. Or if I say, "The sun rises in the east," I am stating a universal truth. It's important to remember that the simple present is usually formed with the base form of the verb, and for third-person singular, we add "-s" or "-es" at the end. Understanding this tense is key, because it forms the base for more complex verb tenses later on. It also helps us communicate clearly and confidently about everyday actions and facts. So, throughout this presentation, keep in mind how vital the simple present tense is in our daily language and communication. Now let's look at the uses of the simple present tense. This tense is commonly used to describe habits, meaning actions we do repeatedly. For example, we catch the bus every morning. It also describes general truths, like water freezes at 0 degrees, which is always true regardless of time. Additionally, we use it for fixed arrangements, such as "his mother arrives tomorrow," when talking about scheduled events. These examples help us understand how the simple present tense is essential for expressing regular actions, facts, and plans. Remember, this tense is fundamental for clear communication about routines and truths. Today, let's look at how we talk about going to school using the verb to go. For example, I say, "We go to school by car," which means more than one person, including myself, is traveling by car to school. When I talk about someone else like he, I say, "He goes to school by car." Notice that with he, she, or it, we add an "s" or "es" to the verb. This is an important rule in English grammar for the present simple tense. So the main points are, for subjects like I, you, we, they, we use the base form of the verb, which is go. But for subjects like she, he, or it, we add an "s", "es", or "y's" to the verb. Understanding these rules helps us form correct sentences when talking about routines or habits, like how we go to school. It's a simple pattern that applies to many verbs, not just to go, and is essential for clear communication. Today, I want to talk about how we form negative sentences in English using the verb to speak. First, let's look at the sentence, "I don't speak English." Notice that when the subject is I, we use do plus the base form of the verb, which is speak in this case. This pattern applies to other subjects like you, we, and they as well. For example, you don't speak English, we don't speak English, and they don't speak English. The key point here is that don't is used for these subjects, and it's followed by the base form of the verb. Now, what about singular subjects like she, he, or it? For those, we use does plus the base form of the verb. So, for example, she doesn't speak English, he doesn't speak English, and it doesn't speak English. Notice that with she, he, or it, we add an apostrophe and s to does. That's the contraction doesn't. The overall idea is that do and doesn't help us make negative statements, and they are followed by the base form of the verb, which remains unchanged. This is an important part of English grammar because it helps us clearly express negation in different subjects. Understanding these patterns will make your speaking and writing much more accurate and natural. Let's take a closer look at how we form questions with the verb to speak in English. On this slide, you'll see the base form of the verb, which is speak. When we want to ask a question, we often start with the auxiliary word do for subjects like I, you, we, or they. For example, do you speak English? Notice that the main verb remains in its base form here. Now, when we're talking about subjects like she, he, or it, we use does instead of do. So the question becomes, does he speak English? Again, the main verb stays in its base form, which is a key point to remember. This slide highlights the general form. For subjects like I, you, we, they, we use do plus the base verb. For she, he, it, we use does plus the base verb. Understanding this pattern is crucial because it helps us construct correct questions in English, which is essential for effective communication. So remember, the question form depends on the subject, and the main verb stays in its base form in both cases. This is a fundamental part of English grammar that you'll use frequently. Today, we're going to look at the simple present tense of the verb be and how it's used with information questions. The verb be is one of the most important verbs in English, and in its simple present form, it helps us describe states, identities, and general truths. When we use the verb be in the present, it changes depending on the subject. For example, I am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, they are. Remembering these forms is key because they form the foundation of basic sentences. Now let's talk about information questions. These are questions that ask for specific details, like who, what, where, when, why, and how. When combined with the verb be, these questions help us gather precise information. For example, if I want to know someone's identity, I might ask, who is your teacher? Or, if I want to know the location of something, I could ask, where is the library? The structure is pretty straightforward. Start with the question word, then the verb be, and then the subject. For example, what is your name? Or where are they from? Understanding how to form these questions correctly is essential because it allows us to gather and share information clearly and efficiently in conversation. So, as we move forward, keep in mind that mastering the simple present of be and its use in questions is a fundamental step toward improving your overall communication skills in English. Today, we're going to explore the simple present tense of the verb be and how to form information questions using it. The verb be is one of the most fundamental verbs in English, and it's crucial for describing states, identities, and characteristics. When we talk about the simple present of be, we use different forms depending on the subject. For example, I am, you are, he is, she is, it is, we are, and they are. These forms are essential because they help us construct clear, correct sentences in everyday communication. Now moving on to information questions. These are questions that ask for specific details like who, what, where, when, why, and how. When forming these questions with the verb be, we typically start with the question word, followed by the appropriate form of be, and then the subject. For instance, if you want to ask about someone's identity, you might say, who is your teacher? Or if you're asking about a location, where is the library? Understanding how to properly form these questions is key to engaging in meaningful conversations and gathering information effectively. Remember, the verb be in questions often switches the order, placing the verb before the subject, so it sounds natural and correct. This slide ties into the overall theme of mastering basic grammar structures that help you communicate clearly and confidently in English. By practicing these forms and question types, you'll build a solid foundation for more complex sentences and conversations. Now, let's look at some examples with the past tense of to be. First, we see were. This is used with plural subjects or you. For example, they were happy with their test results. It means that in the past, they felt happy about their scores. Next, was is used with singular subjects like he, she, or I, for instance. He was poor indicates that at a certain time in the past, he was not wealthy. To help you remember, think of was and were as the past forms of is and are. We also have I, you, we, They, he, she, and it. These are the subject pronouns we use with the past tense of to be. The key point is, was is for singular subjects and were is for plural subjects or you. Understanding these forms helps us talk about the past in a clear, correct way. And finally, this ties into the overall theme of learning how to express past states or conditions in English. Now let's look at some examples of how to form negatives with the verb to be in the past tense. When we want to say that someone was not happy or not poor, we simply add not after was or were. For instance, they were not happy with their test results, or he was not poor. Notice that not is always placed after the verb was or were to make the sentence negative. In the examples on the slide, we see different subjects like you, we, they, I, she, and he. It's important to remember that the negative form of to be in the past is created by adding not after was or were. This is a key point because it helps us form correct negative sentences in the past tense, which is essential for clear communication. Now, moving on to the last part of the slide, we see that to be in the past can also relate to be born, which is often used to talk about someone's birth in the past. Understanding how to form these negative sentences will help you describe situations or states of being in the past accurately. Now let's look at how to form questions with the verb to be in the past tense. When creating these questions, the key is to put the verb before the subject. For example, instead of saying you were yesterday, we ask, were you yesterday? The same applies to other subjects as well. Notice the structure. The question starts with a form of was or were, followed by the subject. For instance, was she sick? Or were they here? This pattern is essential because it helps us clearly ask about past situations or states. On this slide, we also see two example questions. The first is, where were you yesterday? Which asks about a location in the past. The second is, when was she sick? Which focuses on the time something happened. Remember, when using the simple past of to be in questions, always remember to invert the verb and the subject. This is a fundamental rule that helps us communicate clearly in past tense questions. Finally, this slide reminds us that forming questions with to be is straightforward once you remember to put the verb before the subject. This structure is consistent whether you're asking about where someone was or when they experienced something. It's a key part of mastering past tense questions in English. On this slide, I want to highlight the concept of being born. For example, I was born in Al-Khobar, which shows where I came into the world. She was born in 1999, so we're looking at different ways to talk about past events related to birth. Now, when we ask questions like, where were you born? Or, when was she born? We use the verb to be in the past tense. It's important to remember that was and were are the simple past forms of be. This slide emphasizes the difference between statements and questions about birth. For instance, I was born in Al-Khobar is a statement, while where were you born is a question. Also, note that be born is used in question form to ask about the place or time of someone's birth. Understanding how to form these questions correctly helps us gather important information about people's backgrounds. This ties into the overall theme of discussing past events and how we express them in English. It's a fundamental part of talking about our personal histories. Let's take a closer look at how we form questions in the simple past using both regular and irregular verbs. When we ask questions like, did you play a game yesterday? Or, did you have a nice weekend? We start with the word did. Now, an important point here is that even though we're talking about the past, we don't change the main verb to its past form. Instead, we keep the base form of the verb after did. So, for both regular and irregular verbs, the structure remains consistent. We use did plus the base form of the verb. This rule simplifies forming questions in the past tense, especially for learners. Remember, the key is that did signals that we are talking about the past, but the main verb stays in its original form. This helps keep the question clear and grammatically correct. And of course, these questions are usually yes or no questions, meaning the answer will be either yes or no. It's a straightforward way to ask about past actions, regardless of whether the verb is regular or irregular. Now let's take a closer look at how we form questions in the past tense, specifically using WH questions. When you're asking about actions that happened in the past, you often start with words like what, where, or when. These are called WH question words. For example, if you want to ask someone about what they watched on TV last night, you'd say, "What did you watch on TV last night?" Notice that even though we're talking about the past, we use did to help form the question, and the main verb, watch, stays in its base form. Similarly, if you want to ask about a holiday, you'd say, "Where did you go for your last holiday?" Again, did is the key here, and the verb go remains in its base form. This pattern is used both with regular and irregular verbs. The important thing to remember is not to change the main verb into the past tense when using did. It stays in its base form. So, in summary, when forming WH questions in the past tense, we use did plus the base form of the verb, regardless of whether the verb is regular or irregular. This is a crucial point to master for clear and correct past tense questions. Now let's take a look at some examples of regular and irregular verbs. As you can see, regular verbs follow a predictable pattern when we form the past tense, usually by adding ed at the end. For example, walk becomes walked and play becomes played. These are straightforward and easy to remember. On the other hand, irregular verbs don't follow this pattern. Their past tense forms can vary quite a bit, like go becoming went, or buy changing to bought. Because they don't follow a fixed rule, irregular verbs require us to memorize their past tense forms. Understanding the difference between these two types of verbs is crucial, because it helps us use the correct form depending on the context. Recognizing regular verbs makes forming past tense quicker, while knowing irregular verbs adds to our overall language flexibility. This list here is a helpful reference as we continue practicing and improving our verb usage. Remember, mastering these will significantly enhance your fluency and confidence in speaking and writing. Let's take a closer look at this slide. As you can see, we've got these letters arranged in a seemingly random order. C, E, B, A, F, D. Now, at first glance, it might look like just a jumble, but there's actually an important point here about organization and prioritization. What I want to highlight is how, in many projects or processes, we often start with a chaotic set of elements, like these letters, and then need to find a way to arrange them meaningfully. The key is to identify the relationships or the sequence that makes the most sense for achieving our goals. This slide emphasizes the importance of clarity and structure, especially when dealing with complex information. Whether we're sorting data, planning a project, or making strategic decisions, figuring out the right order is crucial. So, as you think about your own work, remember that the initial mess, like these random letters, is often just the starting point. The real skill lies in organizing that chaos into a coherent, effective plan. And that's exactly what this slide is meant to remind us of. Words connected with space and the planetary system are fundamental to understanding our universe. When we think about space, we're really talking about the vast, seemingly endless expanse beyond our planet. It's filled with stars, planets, moons, and countless other celestial objects. The planetary system, in particular, refers to our own solar system, which includes the sun and all the objects that orbit it. These words, like orbit, gravity, planet, asteroid, comet, are more than just vocabulary. They are the building blocks of how we describe and understand the cosmos. Grasping these concepts helps us appreciate the complexity and beauty of the universe. Throughout this presentation, we've seen how these terms connect to broader themes like exploration, discovery, and the science behind space. Understanding these words allows us to better comprehend the phenomena we observe and the missions we undertake to explore space. So, as we continue, keep in mind how each of these words contributes to the bigger picture of space science and our quest to understand the universe. Let's take a moment to explore some fascinating facts about space. Imagine a star shining brightly in the night sky. It's actually a huge ball of hot, glowing gases, and it's the center of many celestial systems. Now, picture a meteor zipping through space. Sometimes we see these as shooting stars when they enter our atmosphere and burn up. The moon, our closest neighbor in the sky, orbits Earth and influences many natural phenomena like the tides. Building on that, Earth itself is a vibrant, life-sustaining planet, the third from the sun. All of these objects are part of the larger solar system, which includes the sun, planets, moons, asteroids, and comets. When we connect these facts, we see how incredible and interconnected our universe truly is, emphasizing just how vast and fascinating space really is. All right, for your homework, please refer to your workbook on page 247. There, you'll find exercise O. Make sure to complete this exercise, as it's a great way to reinforce what we've covered today. Remember, practicing these concepts helps solidify your understanding and prepare you for the next steps. Take your time to work through the questions carefully, and don't hesitate to review the material if you need to. This is an important part of your learning process, so give it your best effort. I look forward to seeing your progress next time.